Welcome to the Film Trooper podcast, empowering filmmaking entrepreneurs.
Hey, welcome to the Film Trooper podcast. Yes, this is the podcast where we empower you, the filmmaking entrepreneur. And a great way to get started is to get the book, How to Make and Sell Your Film Online and Survive the Hollywood Implosion While Doing It. It's available in paperback, Kindle ebook, as well as an audiobook. And in fact, you can get the audiobook for free when you go to survivetheimplosion.com. That's survivetheimplosion.com. Hey, Film Trooper listeners, this is Scott McMahon. In this episode, the indie film coach, Ron Newcomb, and the founder of the VIP Film Summit. You can learn more about his summit coming up at vipfilmsummit.com. Anyway, he sits down with two of the producers from Hamlet in the Golden Vale, and they speak about using a public domain written Shakesperean masterpiece, as well as taking live theater and turning it into a film, all while doing it in Ireland, as well as they talk a little bit about VR stuff. So without further ado, we'll just get right into it. Here's Ron Newcomb and the producers of Hamlet in the Golden Vale here on the Film Trooper podcast.
So hey guys, Ron Newcomb here with the Film Trooper podcast. I am the indie film coach, and I have a treat for you. It is going to be my filmmaking friends with a pretty cool, unique film called Hamlet in the Golden Vale. And it is exactly as it sounds. It is Hamlet, and it is modern and unique, and we're going to talk about that. It is Yuri and Taylor, and I'm going to ask them to just introduce yourself, guys. Tell us a little bit about your filmmaking journey and what kind of led you to this point.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having us, Ron. My name is Yuri. And this is Taylor.
I'm Taylor Myers. I'm the director of Hamlet in the Golden Vale and the artistic director of Roll the Bones, which is the production company that brought this thing to life.
Yeah, and I'm Yuri. I'm the producer on Hamlet in the Golden Vale, and I've worked on some other Roll the Bones projects with Taylor in the past.
So how did you guys connect? And have you guys done predominantly film in the past, or was this kind of a newer venture for you guys?
This is our first film. Roll the Bones specializes in large-scale immersive theatrical work. So we create experiences that are generally, that are always, live. And this idea was spawned originally from an idea that was kind of more in that genre that grew into what it was. In terms of how Yuri and I got hooked up, maybe he can tell that story because it's kind of a fun one.
Yeah, that was great. We predominantly do theater, the both of us, really. And I had come to New York City after college trying to, meet people and meet artists and just try to get into theater however I can. And I found myself very disheartened and not really hadn't met people that I really connected with. And then I almost given up. And then I stopped making theater, I stopped acting, and I just kind of saw shows every now and then, and someone invited me to see The Seagull at 6 a.m. in the East River, overlooking the East River. And I was like, that sounds crazy, sure. And so I went, and I saw this amazing production of The Seagull that Taylor had directed and was in. And I just basically was blown away and kept following Taylor after that and seeing his shows and seen other things, and eventually we started to work together over a long period of time. We got to this place where we make work together in the way that we do.
So there's a couple of things that I really, really like about that story already out the gate. One is that, one of the things a lot of times as us indie filmmakers, I find that artists doing is they're trying to go from like the level that they're currently at to like, A-list talent. That's who they're trying to reach to. And I always try to encourage people to try to reach the tier just above you, because they're much more likely to be able to take conversations. And I've done the same thing. I've met some phenomenal friends and filmmaker, one of which is Scott McMahon, who started Film Trooper podcast and the website. And I was a fan of his first, and then I kind of reached out to him, and sure enough, because we had the same affinity and passion and love for filmmaking, we developed a kinship, and which sprung into a friendship where he felt comfortable enough where he said, hey man, why don't you come on and do this podcast with me? And so it was very, very similar in scope. And then you talk about the whole, giving up. And I don't think there's an artist out there, much less a filmmaker or an actor, because I came into film via acting too. So I have that, and went to LA, and this is in 1994 to 95, and I thought, man, I'm out of here. This is no bueno. I'm giving up. I'm done. And this was pre-digital, so it truly was kind of an all or nothing with the film element, and I thought that was it. So I think I can really resonate and speak from that too, from kind of that giving up thing. And then recently, I did this venture with some friends that we called a cinematic experiential event, where we tried to started with the hypothesis of what would it look like if you could just walk into your favorite fantasy film or your favorite fantasy book. And so a few weekends ago, we did a fully immersive fantasy event where it was kind of like a medieval Ren Fair meets a murder mystery, and a la Game of Thrones, right?
Yeah.
And so we had everybody dress up in period clothing, and even had weapons and a sense of the ability to do combat. And it was called Weekend Warrior. And of course, as a filmmaker, I'm filming all of it, and we have a lot of great footage. But it was this immersiveness, and that is a very interesting thing. This journey is storytellers that we're branching into. So talk to me a little bit about that immersive theater company and how that got started, and what is that about? Like, if I don't know anything about it, talk to me about that.
Sure. So one of the things I would say is that there is, obviously, all of these genres are different ways to tell a story, right? And so whether you're going to see a play, or whether you're going to experience a bit of virtual reality, or you're going to watch a film, or you're going to go to an immersive experience, all of these are just different ways for a human being to experience a different perspective and to experience a story. There's a company based in London called Secret Cinema that you'd probably be very interested in if you haven't heard of them, Ron. They do pretty much what you just described on a huge scale. They do immersive film experiences. One of the last couple times I was in London, I was able to go see their Empire Strikes Back. And basically they had an entire, maybe 120,000 square foot warehouse. It was gigantic. And you go in, you have all this information beforehand where you're supposed to dress in a certain way. You go in and you go into this flight simulator. You crash land on Tatooine. You are inside. You are literally on the planet Tatooine. There's the cantina. There are all of these different little huts that you can go into, and they're and then you get captured and taken to the Death Star. So then you wander around the inside of the Death Star, and then you end up inside a hangar and you watch The Empire Strikes Back. So the whole experience is nearly 5 hours long, right?
Holy cow.
And for the first 2.5 hours, you are in a quote unquote immersive experience, which some of the characters are there. Narratively, it doesn't really, the focus is to kind of live in this world for a little bit, as opposed to experience the whole story of it. So there's stuff to do. You kick around, you can go see a whole bunch of different things, and the characters are wandering around a little bit, but you don't necessarily follow the plot of Empire Strikes Back until you are all seated together in the hangar when you do all watch it together. But they've done a whole bunch. They've got another one. They're doing Moulin Rouge right now. They've done Lawrence of Arabia with camels and sand dunes. They're insane. Well, they're beautifully insane. And so that is certainly a breeding ground between immersive theater and film. The immersive work that we make, or the reason that we make it, is because for me it has become very quickly the genre, the kind of mode of storytelling that I find most thoroughly cuts to the core of human experience, and that the kind of communications that can exist between people inside an immersive experience, and the kind of revelatory experience that can be accessed so quickly when you put someone into a world like that. I just find it to be more efficient than pretty much any other genre that I've come across.
Efficient, that's a funny word.
Yeah.
It's amazing. Well, it's very. Taylor's been doing immersive theater for a long time. I came to it kind of working with him, and so I still very much take an audience perspective, I think, on it very often. And for me, watching immersive theater it's efficient is an interesting word. It gets to this level of connection that I think a lot of people, the concept of catharsis, which is kind of the center of lots of theater and film in a lot of ways, it gets there very quickly and in such a real way, and such that if you see the actors afterward, you're honestly, genuinely wondering whether that connection that you felt so strongly is still there. And many people, and I as an experienced theater goer, stop myself, but I have to stop myself every time. But I stop myself and I go, no, it's not. But I'm sure, and Taylor, I'm sure because you perform a lot of them. A lot of people don't really kind of remind themselves of that fact, and they do think that it's so real because for them it really was. It's immersive theater is so visceral in a way that a lot of other theater is struggles to get to that place.
I think what makes it the most one of the things that makes it extraordinarily interesting is that you are a fictitious character engaging with an audience member under fictitious circumstances. However, the engagement itself is honest and real.
Yeah.
So the fact is that you are playing someone else who has whatever relationship with this stranger under fictitious circumstances. And then once you are A, no longer in character, and B, no longer in those circumstances, that communication and that memory of that experience still exists for both parties. Yeah. And as the performer, you have the power and the authority, and that you've done that one-on-one 3 times that night, and so and 10 times that week, and 100 times since the show opened, and so that that experience was part of very, very distinctly part of a one-on-one. For an audience member who is perhaps seeing an immersive show for the first time, sometimes a thing can happen where the boundaries get a little bit foggy, and you do start to wonder how much of this magic is real, how much of this magic is performative, how much of this is just 2 people in a room together, or 20 people in a room together, and one of them is the performer and the other 19 are audience members, watching the scene.
Yeah.
It's still something totally different. You have so much more to work with. If you're watching a film, you have your eyes and you have your ears, and that's pretty much it. Yeah. And if you're watching a play or a dance piece, the same senses are engaged, right? Or directly engaged, purposefully engaged. Whereas with an immersive piece, you walk into a space and the room feels different because you've gone into a whole bunch of different rooms, right? And it's artistically and beautifully designed, so the space itself feels different. It smells different. You can see things, but you can also change your perspective, so your sight is activated more than just looking at a screen. You can go up to something, or you can move it away from you, and then an actor will come in and lay a hand on your shoulder or something, and your touch is activated. All of these other ways for you to understand a story. So all of a sudden, your heart, instead of just accessing your heart through your eyeballs or your ears, you're accessing your heart through literally your entire body.
Yeah. No, I love that. And, the Weekend Warrior event, we had this epic battle on Saturday night. And I'm telling you, the people got so worked up that they were there for that moment in time. It was a great acting experience, if you will, just in a sense of improv, where you could, if you allowed yourself to be, we were no longer in Culpeper, Virginia, where we did this. We were in this fictitious kingdom of Oleron just for a moment. And we all allowed ourselves to go there. And it created this literal visceral response where people were sweating, and the memories are true. The
memories are true, and the activity is true, because in those moments you were actually behaving as someone else. That's right. With a bunch of people who were also actually behaving as other people. So even though you might go see Robert, your buddy who was there, and and you guys go and get a beer, you go get coffee, whatever, the look in the eyes that you two shared at a specific moment when the battle was happening, that was a sense of kinship or brotherhood or protection or whatever it was that passed between the two of you, and it connects your spirit to his and his to yours in a way that you're not going to get by drinking a cup of coffee together.
It is this immersiveness. And I tried to articulate this to people from time to time. If I had a crystal ball and could look into the future, and you don't need to look far, you can see it's here with VR and everything else. But this immersiveness is something fascinating to me, where back in the day, 15 years ago, nobody would dress up at a Ren fair, maybe 10% of the people. Now go to a Ren fair, and it's like 80% of the people dress up at a Ren fair. You're kind of the odd one out, and it's because people want that sense of immersiveness. So let me just take you through do a follow-up question with the immersive theater company. I'm assuming it is exactly what it sounds, that as you're articulating, Taylor, that people can actually come up, the actor engages with the audience, and it truly is immersive, where they're either the story is happening around them or with them, or they're actually even a part of the story. Is that accurate?
So every show is different, and every show... Every show that even falls under the genre of immersive theater and every company and every show within every company has a different perspective and a different tactic on audience engagement. And a lot of the time that depends on like the show itself and the location and a whole bunch of logistical questions. An immersive show, I tend to define it as a show wherein audience members exist within the scenic boundaries of the world. They're not sitting in seats. They are within the set itself.
Okay.
Sometimes that is extremely interactive. Sometimes it is much, much less interactive and more purely immersive, where they are immersed in the setting, but they are not necessarily interacting with it or engaging with it.
Okay.
Sometimes there are specific scenes where it is one audience member and one performer, and those get much more interactive. Sometimes it's a large scene or a huge scene where you'll have 10 people doing something like even quote-unquote on a stage-like area with like a couple hundred people watching it. But like it is still all part of the same genre.
Yeah.
Yuri, do you have anything?
I think that it's a funny thing to ask. Yeah, as people are, it takes all these various forms, but everything's kind of, the toolbox is really open with immersive theater. Someone can literally be, we talk a lot, and when we design immersive shows, we talk a lot about like who are you casting the audience member as?
Huh. Interesting.
They oftentimes in the character work, even if they're not a person in the play that you're doing. Even if they never know that they're a person in the play that they're doing, they are someone to you as the character, and they're going to feel that throughout the purpose. The purpose of an immersive scene in most cases is for them to feel that connection in truth. So, whether they get up and walk somewhere with you or they don't walk somewhere with you, that's kind of a detail that really depends on what you're trying to achieve with the scene and kind of what the text is about. But in most cases, they are someone in that world that belongs there, and you belong there, and you belong there together, and you're going through an experience together as one would kind of in life.
Yeah, that's one of the things that is I find is so important. That a very important point that Yuri just brought up, which is in casting your audience member as someone and being extraordinarily clear with it, because they look to you as the authority in the space. To tell them, silently, just with your eyes, just in the way that you behave towards them, who they are, to give them enough comfort where they're like, oh, I get it. He is looking at me as if I'm his mother. And then he came and just held my arm as if I was his mother. And now we're walking together. I really feel like this guy's mother. Or he's looking at me like he wants to have sex with me. And now he's like, flirting with me, or like whatever it is, right? There are an innumerable number of options for how you can communicate these things with somebody, but you do have to be very clear about like who they are in the space. Even if you're just like walking past and you want this person to not follow you, like there are a million tactics to do that, but what you do is like you cast them as somebody who you are not interested in and who is not going to follow you.
Yeah, so that tends to be the game. That's the game of like when you're setting up an immersive scene or show, is you've got your source material, you've got your location, and the game is, okay, how are audience members a part of this world? How are we all a part of this world? Because without that, it's not really immersive. They're just kind of passively watching. It's actually an essential part of it.
I love it. It's fascinating, and one I'm glad we spent some time on, because I do think as indie filmmakers is that what I'm trying to convey is, and I know what Scott is as well, is think of your film as an IP, right? Not just a film. So really what I've been talking to filmmakers is really you're a storyteller and you're using film as your medium, but you're storytellers. And we need to be thinking that way for a couple reasons. One, shorts a much more pervasive and even a monetary option where they weren't just even a little bit ago.
Yeah.
We'll talk about VR in a little bit, and that's certainly a space as filmmakers we should be thinking about. But then you also have games and books and graphic novels, and you're really a storyteller at the heart of it. And film is the palette of which we're doing. And you guys chose theater, but then your subject matter, of which you then went and filmed. You chose Shakespeare, Hamlet, right? So. Talk to me about how you guys got from this immersive theater experience to choose a movie, and if there was any relationship between film and immersive theater that really kind of inspired you guys.
Yeah, it was I want to tell the story. It was a very delicate. I think that the greatest ideas that we have, at least that the shows that end up happening, are those that come from this moment of kind of concentrated inspiration, and if you plan it all out, if you like sit down and go, okay, it's time to come up with the next big thing. What could we do? A film? And it's just,
Yeah.
So what, as all these stories end up turning out, we were actually at a gala for a nonprofit Shakespeare company that I run called Shakespeare in the Square. And our friend had just returned from a long Euro trip, and he was showing us photos of this castle he had stayed at.
Ooh, cool.
And Taylor was looking at these photos, and he comes up to me and he's like, Yuri, look at these pictures. Look at this castle. Wouldn't it be amazing if we just like went to the castle with a bunch of actors and just like did Hamlet or something for no one, just did it. I'd be like, yeah, that would be. And then we continued with the party. And the next morning I woke up and I remembered having this conversation. I texted Taylor. I'm like, wait, can we really talk about this though? And that the whole, what excited us was this place and the idea of us taking this story that we're pretty familiar with because we had worked with the Shakespeare Company quite a bit, and we have a lot of training in that.
Dan Hasse, the co-director of Hamlet, founded this company.
Exactly, yeah, and we run it together. And so having had all that experience, the idea of just taking Hamlet and just doing it in this space alone by itself is such an artistically fulfilling idea. And that's really where it started. And so we just kind of started from there. We're like, okay, well, what would that mean? What does it mean to take a bunch of actors to Ireland?
Yeah, practically, the impracticality of it rather quickly outweighed the artistic merit of the idea. So we went from that down the natural trajectory of like, well, we make immersive theater. Okay, so let's do an immersive show. It'll be in a castle. It'll be amazing. But then it's like, well, it's like way out in the Irish countryside. It's like 2.5 hours away from Dublin, and like we don't even know anybody in Dublin. So like, how are we going to get anybody to come see it? And they were like, well, okay, so what's a better way to do this? And then I don't actually remember who it was.
I have no idea how
it was me, or it was Dan or Jake. Somebody was like, well, what if we did a movie? And they were like, okay, now we're talking.
Yeah. And the context here is that Taylor and I do a lot of immersive theater, but Dan has a BFA in screenwriting and did a lot of student film at NYU, which is a lot of great filmmakers come out of NYU, and he through and kind of all of our connections to NYU are acquainted with a lot of really great filmmakers. And so it wasn't something that was like, let's try a movie. It was kind of like, well, a lot of us are also engaged in this other art form that up until this point has been sort of separate. Dan's running Shakespeare in the Square with me, and he doesn't even have a degree in that. He actually studied film, and yet we've never done a film.
And I've done a bunch of film acting before, but I've never directed it. So we came up with this, like, the most practically sound idea of like capturing this experience, though the idea was still based in the experience, which was like, we're going to ship a bunch of people to Ireland, we're going to live in a castle for a couple weeks, and we're going to make a movie. But we, of course, weren't just going to make a movie. We were also going to still do this immersive piece, because how are you going to go and live in a castle and not have other people come into your castle with you?
Exactly.
Yeah. So we set up 11 shooting days, as well as 2 immersive performances. And then we were feeling a little wacky, so we were like, well, let's get some other ideas in here. And Ben Wygonic, our production designer, and one of the other producers on the film, had just set up he was the technical director for a Google pop-up store in Soho, and had some friends he was working with there, and was like, you guys, Google's come out with this insane new VR rig called the Google Jump. It's like 16 GoPros around a wheel, and like, I just met the director of VR at Google yesterday. Like, maybe we could communicate with them about this.
Yeah.
So he was able to reach through some of the people there, Brian Rose and Jess Brillhart, and some of the other really wonderful people who are in charge of the VR department at Google, and was able to say, like, hey, you guys, we're interested in, like, perhaps doing this. And this is exactly what you were talking about before, Ron, about taking one step up and not trying to take 10 steps up. Like, to take one step up, you can get by with a really, really good idea.
Right.
To take 10 steps up, you have to, like, it has to be some random miracle.
Yeah.
But, like, if you're going to take one step up and you have a great idea, people a step or two in either direction are still going to recognize the greatness of the idea.
Yeah.
And so, like, the idea is cool. It's like, we're going to ship 18 people to Ireland, and we're going to, like, do this immersive experience in 7 stories of this castle and 2 chalets and a ravine and a camp. And we're also going to make this, beautiful film with this, incredible cinematographer, Corey Framenlath, shot this beautifully. Dan made a gorgeous adaptation. And Katie and Ben had such insight into the art direction of the entire thing. So whatever. So we get in contact with Google, and they're like, we have 2 jumps. One of them's been loaned out to a team for a variety of months, and the other one's been just loaned out to the National Theatre in London. But then again, London's not that far from Ireland, so maybe reach out to them. Here are a couple email addresses. So we reached out to the people at the National Theatre, and Google had actually lent their jump to the immersive storytelling studio at the National Theatre in London, which is an arm of the National Theatre that is dedicated to exploring new modes of storytelling to better allow audience members to achieve a different perspective.
And very specifically, they do, the 2 things they do there are immersive theater and virtual reality.
Wow.
And it is such a funny, you always think, like, oh, those are kind of related, but they were like, fuck yes, they're related.
Yeah.
And they are. And oh, they are.
And oh, they are.
So fortunately, they were really responsive to the stuff we sent them. We sent them a couple of decks. We had a whole pitch process with them where we talked about what the project was we had in mind for it and all this stuff, and what we wanted from them, which was essentially the jump and a couple people from their team. And then they thought it was a really good idea to get this other company, VR City in London, involved because they're super VR pros. And so it ended up that they came out. A handful of people from the National and from VR City came to see the final immersive performance. Yeah. And then the next day, we spent all day shooting this VR experience inside the castle, and then about a couple of miles away at this ruined abbey.
Holy cow. Man, this just sounds like, what I love is kind of like what you're saying, is that the good idea became great, and everyone started to catch the vision, and it just started to grow, and before you know it, you found yourself in Ireland in a castle. Like, who doesn't want to do that? Who doesn't want to go? I'm sure filmmakers out there are salivating a little bit. So I got a lot of questions, but one that I love, so I'm a fantasy and sci-fi nut. That's what I try to live in these worlds. So I've had visions of grandeur about going to specifically Ireland. And I've visited Ireland before and filming there. And I know a little bit about their tax incentive program. Obviously, they film Game of Thrones there a little bit, so they have some infrastructure. But how did you guys even start to think about it? As you said, Taylor, we didn't know anybody in Dublin who's going to come, to our immersive theater, and then how are we going to get, crew and everything over there? And how did that all happen? I mean, were there permits that you have to deal with? Was there local hires that you had to deal with? Then I want to get into the castle, where you find that. And I want to know the name of that, because I want to call this guy and
he's a great guy. There's a lot of production stuff like that.
Logistically, it was quite complex, and no one knows it better than Yuri.
I often serve the kind of like the read the long documents role in these teams. And so tax incentive wise, I actually wasn't able to crack too much in terms of incentives for a foreign production company in Ireland. I found that Ireland itself seems to focus a lot on Irish people making Irish things. There's lots of grants and things like that there for that. The Irish Film Board is great for that kind of thing. And then they have some funding for Irish artists who want to go somewhere else.
Oh, interesting.
They'll fund that kind of thing.
Okay.
But I didn't find, I mean, they were very nice people, but I didn't find a lot of opportunities to get an external company to get some tax incentives. But yeah, there's definitely the biggest thing that the biggest question that you always have to kind of deal with. And it's funny because immediately when we came back from Ireland, our friend was going to Cambodia. And so she's calling me up because I'm now the resident professional at getting a film over there, having done it one time. The biggest thing is getting your equipment there because the question is, do you rent in stateside or do you rent over there?
Yeah.
In facilitating the conversation between the rental houses out in Ireland and our cinematographer, he often said things like, I've specified what I'm looking for here, but I don't know that they really have it. They say they have it, but maybe the measurements are different. Maybe the electrical systems are different. So there's always this trade-off of what do you get here? What do you get there? What do you absolutely need? What is mission critical that the whole thing is just in a big issue if you don't get it right? That's the kind of stuff you might likely get here. And what's the stuff that you can work around, that you can kind of delay for a day or two? That's the kind of stuff that we tried to get there. And so it was a split of that. The big thing about when you're taking stuff out of here and bringing it there is something called the carnet. And a carnet is a document that you register with the governments of the country that you're leaving and the country that you're entering. And it is basically an exemption from import and export taxes. You're saying that I'm bringing in this equipment that has commercial value, and I'm telling you that I'm bringing it in, and I'm telling you exactly what I'm bringing in and how much it costs, so that later on when I leave, you can see that I still have it. And so I haven't illegally sold this equipment while in this country and made money off of it without paying import-export taxes.
Gotcha.
Carnets are super, super complicated. There's long pages. You have to really get a lot of details on what you're getting. Bringing in, bringing out, and so that's one of the big hurdles, and it's really the life hack there is get that stuff early, know exactly what equipment you're renting, and honestly rent it 4 days before you have to fly out, because then the other thing was insurance. Insurance was the other big thing.
Sure.
Just real quick,
different.
the reason he's saying to get it 4 days early is because you not only need the make and model, but you also need the country of origin of every piece and the serial number of every piece. Yeah. And you can't really ask for that information from a rental house. So if you're renting 6 lenses, you can't be like, hey, can you send me the country of origin and the serial number for all of these 6 lenses? They're going to be like, just look at it when you get them. Because it's printed on the on the item itself. But you have to have all that stuff.
Right.
Yeah,
yes, that was a big thing.
Okay, so you got to add that into your budget. Okay, go ahead, Taylor. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Oh, I was just also going to say that I have a funny story about our carnet experience that isn't informative at all. So if there's time later, I'll tell it. But I'm going to let Yuri carry on. If you want the carnet story, just
the carnet story is great.
Yes,
there are a lot of them. And the other great big important thing is insurance. Insurance works really different depending on which country you're in, and their standards for stuff is completely irrespective of each other, and yet consistent within the country. And so there was this huge game I was playing where
that sounds like a story right there.
Sorry.
Yeah, I'm summing this all up now in a 10-minute conversation. But this is a saga.
I forgot how complex this was.
It was this game you're playing where the insurance standards of Ireland, and it's different in every country, I'm sure, is you need $7 million of coverage per event, 7 million euros of coverage per event in Ireland.
Wow.
Whereas the standard in America is $1 million.
Yeah, it's $1 million, right?
And so we were trying to get insurance
for 7 million euros.
And they're like, what the hell?
Why would you need that? And then I'm going around and people are quoting me astronomical prices.
That had to be crazy.
Insurance.
Yeah. Approximately 7 times as much as you think it might expect.
Right.
Because to them it's 7 insurance
times. Yeah,
policies.
exactly. And then so finally I end up thinking what if I call it an Irish insurance company? What could happen?
Yeah.
And so I call an Irish insurance company, and they're like, "Oh yeah, that's real simple. That's like
That's average.
yes, that's what we do. Yeah,
average.
that's
That
like
is
if
us.
you're doing an
Yeah.
event at a school, we'll give you that."
Yeah.
So then, but then you're dealing with the fact that if you're trying to buy insurance from an Irish place, you need an Irish address to register that under. And so what really helped there is that we happen to have one local person that ended up being an associate producer on the project called Mark Logan. He actually lived there, so we registered the insurance under his name, and that was kind of a big save there. But those are kind of some things that you want to think about, and if you're gonna, it's a trade-off, because if you don't have that local Irish location, you might end up having to pay this like maybe tens of thousands of dollars for insurance for an American company to insure you for foreign production, and it can get pretty crazy. So those are kind of the hurdles, and really it's going to be different every show you do.
Yeah, some of the stuff you like who knows what the insurance is like, even if we were to go to France.
Yeah.
Like, who knows? It's like a couple 100 miles, but like it's a completely different country with completely different rules. So like some of this stuff is just so specific. It's one of those things. It's like, well, hurdles pop up in front of every production.
Yeah.
So like you make sure you've got a great hurdle athlete, Yuri Pavlich, to like conquer all of those.
Yeah, no, definitely. No, that is the role of the producer. You got to be a problem solver, right?
Absolutely.
You definitely got to do that. So if I'm tracking all this, you had an 11-day shoot, 2 performances, the VR experience afterward, 18 people. Was that the total you guys took over?
That's right.
Yep.
Over to the island. So what was your prep time there? Did you guys do storyboards when you guys said, okay, we're going to do live performance, we had a VR experience, and we're going to be shooting this to capture it for film? What was take me through the prep a little bit.
Prep time was about 6 months of like real work. The conception of the idea was July. Originally we were like, let's ball this thing together and ship out in September. This is last September, a year, and 13 months ago, 14 months ago almost. And we were like, all right, well, let's see. Because the way that I liken these projects to their occurrence to happening is like a big boulder and a hill, right? And so like the idea happens to like one or a small group of people who start to put hands on this boulder and push it up the hill. And the more people that continue to like take steps up this hill, the more hands get put on it, the faster it starts to go. And at some point, the boulder falls down the other side of the hill, and nobody has any control over it anymore in terms of it happening. You all still have control over it. You all still like
direct it a little bit.
You can direct it, but like the project's happening. And so from conception, first hand laid on the boulder, which was July, and then we rescheduled that. The September was just ridiculous. It was never gonna work like that. But so we rescheduled it to like late March, early April of this year. And then put in about 6 really solid months of production meetings. Did we start production meetings every week for the whole time? Yeah, production meetings every week with the core production team, as well as rehearsals. And the point of the rehearsals over that entire process was to rehearse the story, was to rehearse the experience, was to rehearse the idea of what was happening here, and to grapple with our actors and the story of Hamlet at such a depth that it didn't matter if we were doing immersive theater, it didn't matter if we were doing film, it didn't matter if we were doing VR. The point is that the scene exists, that we understand the scene, and we know what's happening here. So, like, if there's a camera right here and we're like shooting a close-up, like all of our actors amazingly are brilliant and skilled enough to know the difference performatively between a camera and someone on the other side of the room. And the point of that long time of rehearsing really regularly was to dive deep enough into it and to be as considerate and thorough as possible with it, so that when we got there, we knew that it's like, all right, well, you're on film today, so like what you'll do. The performances tonight, so like you'll know you do, like whatever it is. But the core of it was what we really needed to build before that.
Yeah,
So
and
were these Shakesperean veterans, or were they?
A lot of them. A lot of them. almost all of them have done more stage than film. A lot of them have done a bit of film as well. Some have done some TV as well. Some had never been on film before at all. But this is one of the other things that I will stand by no matter what, is that if you can trust someone, you don't necessarily need their resume to speak very loudly. It was very, very clear that, like, for instance, Jonathan and Beth Ann Hopkins, right? They played Polonius and Gertrude, married in real life. I don't think either of them had done any film before, and blow it out of the water.
Yeah, they were really
because
good.
They are amazing performers. They are truly gifted, skilled actors who know Shakespeare damn well. They're both very, very smart people. And, like, the fact remains that for you to play to the back of the house is just a different kind of tuning than for you to play to a camera or for you to play to someone in a one-on-one in a room next to you. All of those things, like the point is the text, is the story, is the communication, is what's happening. So
and I will say that pretty much every actor has had pretty extensive experience with Shakespeare. Definitely, and that's sort of a table stakes when it comes to doing Shakespeare, especially Hamlet. And also your question about storyboarding, we actually storyboarded very extensively as well. We storyboarded the whole entire thing, and we pretty much did all of the work that could have possibly been done, having never seen the location.
Oh wow, okay, yep.
Which is not all of it, obviously, but we really front loaded all of this work up to the point where we were like building, we were building a house with space for a room. Yeah. And the room was the place where we were going to be. And then we get there and we're like, okay, we got it. Seen all the photos and watched all the videos, and we kind of like can slot in like, okay, this is what this room is actually like. That's how that thing's going to go. Yeah. And so we did a lot of this prep work because we didn't have a lot of time, right? We needed to have it storyboarded hardcore because you get there and it's day 1 of 11. And we need 8 hours.
The movie doesn't happen.
Yeah. So your guys' timing was just. Yeah, I mean, it had to be tight.
Time was so unbelievably tight that was why so much preparation work went into it here. Because if it hadn't, it wouldn't have existed. It quite simply would not have existed.
Absolutely.
So this is just a curiosity question. Did you guys do accents or no?
No. Well, everyone had their traditional American stage dialect.
Okay.
But no.
Now, is that a choice you made, Taylor, or was that kind of just from experience, having done it, or?
That was, it's based on a couple different things. That wasn't even really a conversation that came up. In all of the Shakespeare that I've done, I've never done a British accent.
Mm-hmm.
I've done a Cockney accent, like for a specific character in a specific show, but like only ever for character purposes. Like at the end of the day, the way that people spoke in 1600 in England sounds as different from modern British dialect as it does from modern American dialect. There are some people who studied. I can't remember who it was. It was maybe the director of the Globe.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. Yeah, there's a video he does where he actually does monologues in the traditional kind of the accents that they've been able to excavate, and it's so different. It's like wow.
It's like it's halfway between modern Irish and modern Virginian.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's studied based on Shakespeare's text using the meter and the rhythm and the rhyme of it.
So who really knows?
Like presumably that is a better idea than no guess at all, but like it's probably also slightly off. And like at the end of the day, who is our audience, and why would we put on a bunch of accents that are simply another accent?
One of the things that we really borrowed from our experience doing Shakespearean theater is that Shakespeare has gone through so many iterations of productions that the rules have changed. The performance rules have sort of changed for what an audience will accept. And so things like genders being the genders that you normally think they would be have really been stretched. Doubling has been stretched to the point where we actually doubled actors in this film. And kind of included it in the way that we're presenting, because the kind of conceit of the beginning of the movie is that it's 8 actors going to a castle to live the life of Hamlet.
The original idea.
The original idea. Sure. And so that you first see them as just people in modern day, and then they put on their costumes and they take them off and they put them back on throughout the movie. And so doubling was used, all these kind of tropes, and so things like accents and all these other things that kind of are used to make the production quality more realistic have in over the past couple hundred years have been sort of let go for Shakespeare specifically, and it's allowed for a greater flexibility in kind of what you can put on stage, and I really think has improved the production quality of it in a lot of ways.
Yeah, no, I mean, I love the just the way that you guys are coming at the way to tell story. Just a unique differentiating factor you guys have done for this. And then, well, talk to me a little bit about where you guys are at in the post-production process.
It's going so well. I'm so happy with it. I'm not being sarcastic. It's going really well. Yeah.
Yeah. So it sounded like, when did you guys do this? You guys did this, was I reading that right too, Taylor? It was like a year ago, a little over a year ago?
Wrapped April 5th.
Okay. Yeah, we wrapped. So yeah, about 7 months ago, 6 months ago.
Holy moly. See, I mean, in most indie filmmakers, it's like a 5 to 7 year average. Yeah. From like conception of like, I think I'm going to do a movie.
Yeah.
You think it's a year later. No, it's 5 to 7 years. So that's the other thing that I love that you guys have done is you just went and did it. Now, you guys are getting the project. You're going to have it in hand. What's kind of well, first of all, what's your assessment of it? Is it everything you thought it would be? Is it even better? I've gotten to see just a few clips, and I got to say, who did the cinematography?
Corey Freeman Lott. Shot on a Sony CD.
Holy man, Corey, this stuff is beautiful.
Yeah.
Stuff is beautiful. Okay.
Yeah, it looks good. The man
I was a little concerned because again, it was the time you guys had 11 days to shoot. Certainly, you don't get a sense of that in the story. The actors felt real and authentic and present. It was really well done, the stuff I've gotten to see. So I'm very eager to see the end product. And you guys obviously are behind the veil a little bit. Are you guys like, oh yeah, this is something, we got something. Where are you at with that from like a producer?
We feel very good. I mean, it's amazing because you see like we saw all the footage after our editor, who is a genius, Phil Foligno, after he had cut together just the first assembly. It was like 2 hours and 40 minutes long, something like this. Which, like, I mean, Hamlet's a 4-hour story.
Yeah.
So it's not. He actually cut some stuff out. Yeah.
Well, the adaptation first, and then he
already cut some stuff out, and then he, was so first assembly, and we were like, wow, we feel great about this. We all went over to Dan's, and like I think there were 6 or 7 of us sat down and watched it, and we're like, some of us were moved to tears just by the fact, really, that we had done it.
That it happened.
Of course,
it's there.
Of course. So my theory is every filmmaker that gets to the point of getting it into the can should immediately win an Oscar. And then later we can debate like performance, but immediately you should just walk on stage. Totally. Thank you, I finished.
Right? Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
It does feel that way. Yeah.
Yeah. But so since then, it has undergone a great deal of change. Obviously, too. It is now exactly 2 hours long, so a good 30 to 40 minutes from the original assembly have been cut out. Our colorists over at Irving Harvey have done an incredible job. And like completely changed the mood and look of the film. Looks gorgeous. Our sound mixer and editor, Arjun Sheth at Final Frame, has also made it like the world changes so much, so much, and everyone will tell you. And like I'm sure I'm revealing exactly how much of a nubile filmmaker I am with this next comment, but. Everybody will tell you how important sound is. and so like our budget for the whole thing has been tight, and we're busting our humps through post to like try and bring this thing together too. And we're like kicking over a couple different ideas. Do we want like kind of a younger sound editor who will like take a little bit more time with it, but like cost less money? Or do we want to send it to like a really legit house like Final Frame, which is going to be more expensive, but like we know for damn sure they're going to do an amazing job. Yeah. And then like, And so we're like kicking around this question, and everyone we talk to is like, sound is really important. Just don't screw it up. Yeah. And so we're like, all right, well, we're going to do it. We'll pull the trigger. We'll do what we have to do. And like have it, and it changes everything. It changes everything.
So huge.
A story is told so much through the way that you hear it. And it's not even just like how good the sound on location is, or like how good the sound editing or the dialogue editing is. Like, the world exists separately from what you see as what you hear. And when you have an amazing combination of those two, like, the thing takes off on a rocket ship.
The sound is an essential element, and I was kind of told the same thing. As an early filmmaker, that's where I kind of spent the money, and then you add in the soundtrack and all these other elements. I mean, it does. And that's one of the things I love about filmmaking is the artistic collaboration, how many artists actually come together. I mean, you guys, which I love, keep giving credit to everybody else, which is the producer's thing, all these other amazing people, because it took a team to make it happen. Life really isn't done in isolation, and neither is filmmaking. It is not meant to be 100%. Done in isolation. You guys mentioned, just briefly, can you talk a little bit about budget, like approximately what was it, and then even where potentially did you guys come up with the capital yourselves, do a crowdfunding campaign, get angel investors? What was that kind of schema to make that happen?
So I've crowdfunded one show with Roll the Bones before. I think just the Seagull. Just the Seagull was crowdfunded. But like it's good and it's bad. Crowdfunding is good and it's bad, right? It's a stressful, difficult process. Making money is a stressful, difficult process. Yeah. So whether you're going to ask everyone you know for it, or you're going to like find other routes for it, whatever, it's difficult in its own way. The budget for this was tight from the get-go. It was pretty much enough to like make the thing happen, and one of the and nothing else. And that
specifically means just to get the film shot and on a hard drive. And that's all the money we had at first. We did not have the money for post until we got there.
And not meaning not until we got to Ireland, but not until we got to post.
We got to post,
that is an industry, an option that a lot of indie filmmakers need to know about. Is that it can be a little nerve-wracking at times, right? But sometimes you just steamroll, and that's what it's called, steamrolling into production. You just know you're going to create, you hope that you're going to create enough magic, because production is the fun, isn't it? Isn't that the sizzle? That's the fun.
It is.
Absolutely.
And 100%. All of a sudden on Facebook, everybody in social media, you have stuff that you can post versus, hey, go look at my pitch deck and give me 10 grand. It's like, no. Look at these stills. Look at some of this footage. Exactly. This is raw. Yeah. Suddenly people can catch the vision, and you can kind of get through post. Almost every project I've had to kind of do that. So I can appreciate
it's tough.
that.
And stressful too, because I mean, and if people are looking at this as an option for like making their production happen, then they should also know that it is one of the reasons that like your first indie feature will take 5 to 7 years, because you'll shoot the thing, you'll get done with it, you'll have spent all your cash, you'll be going into post production, which costs as much as or more than you spent on the film.
Absolutely.
And is going to take longer. So like, know that when you are done, when you have shot your final shot, when you've drank your martini at the end of the last day, you are like approaching halfway.
Yeah, there's a whole journey ahead of you, and that's just getting post, and then after that, there's a whole journey of what do I do with this film?
It's like festivals and distribution and all this other stuff.
As we're coming down a little bit to our time, I didn't want to miss an opportunity to briefly at least talk a little bit about two things, but the first one is VR. So this, you don't need to know that is definitely in the future, because it's now, right? It's not in the future. It is here, and it is here to stay. And it's a really fascinating, interesting world. But as a filmmaker, I do find it challenging of how to figure that space out. Like, on one hand, I hear people define it as, well, it's the 360. And then it's like, no, there's a whole, virtual reality is something else. So help me understand a little bit about the VR and particularly your experience with VR.
Sure. You want to talk about our experience, and then I'll talk about like what I think about it.
Yeah. Our experience was, it's definitely kind of, it to us, it really crosses into what theater is. VR has to be shot. It's a one shot, more or less. You have to do the whole thing. There's no, scene cuts, or if there are, you have to make these like funky transitions and stuff like that.
Yeah,
mask it all. there's no behind the camera because the camera's all around. So everything in the room is actually what's in the room. There's no guy holding a boom. There's no lights, or the lights have to be
hidden or
existing. You know what I mean?
Practical.
Yeah, and there are some tricks you can play, which we learned. One of the biggest, we came in knowing that, and then one of the things that we luckily learned from VR City is that you can play with that, and do something like these things called plates, where you shoot the VR and it's in 360, but the first time you shoot it, you're only thinking about the stuff kind of 8 feet above the ground,
like the top half of the sphere, the northern
kind
hemisphere.
of break it. Okay.
Exactly, and then so you only so you keep all the lights below.
Yep.
And then you're seeing all that, and then you pull all the lights above, and then you film the stuff below 8 feet, and then you put them together in 2 plates. So there are some kind of games you can play with that, which are kind of, I think, instrumental in making real VR. But but it struck me with how much it was. It was the most theater part of the film experience that really was, because it was one take, the same take over and over again. You had to be mindful of the audience member. The camera was really an audience member that I like threw a sword above the audience member's head, and then I slashed above or their head, and I like dashed around them and all this kind of stuff. So it really is to me the convergence of VR and theater, and that's how filming it really felt.
Yeah, that sounds fun.
In terms of creating this stuff, I think that one of the reasons that generally filmmakers can get hung up on how to tell a story in VR is because it is so wildly different from traditional filmmaking. With filmmaking, like the very understanding of how to create it, like the language that is used to describe it, like the camera is the filmmaker, and the frame is the lens, and like the filmmaker's design of those two items is what creates a film.
And
is
so
how
much control
how
that
the
they have.
story is told,
right?
And like when cuts come is when perspective shifts, and like all like the whole process of it is what it is to make a film, right? But what it is to make a VR piece is really what it is to put an audience member into an experience and just let them be there. So my experience with immersive theater was extraordinarily helpful for me because I'm used to creating an environment where the whole thing is activated, and I'm used to creating a space where an audience member can look wherever they want. So we were able to create an experience that said, okay, our audience members here, they can look wherever they want, but they can't move. So how are we going to create a story, a narrative that like has one general through line, but also has stuff all around to keep them engaged? So if they look behind them or they look to each side or up into the gallery or down at their feet, like how are we going to have all of this space active at once? And I think to take a step away from like storytelling through film and instead just to look at it as if you had never made a film before, and to say, okay, what happens to the viewer? Oh, they're in a space and they can look at all this stuff, and then ask the questions like, okay, what's the most amazing shit I could do then? Like if they could be looking in any direction, what kind of tricks can I play? What kind of magic can I make happen? What kind of stuff can I do that is going to absolutely thrill someone in this experience and not even really think about what it is to make a film because it's just different?
Yeah. Yeah, no, I love it. I love the idea of VR. I have a friend of mine that has a couple cameras. We've been talking about which story is the right one, because that's not every story is the right one for the medium, but certainly want to go play in that world, and that immersiveness is something that is appealing. So the other thing I wanted to talk about briefly, and where we've all had a little bit of conversation, is where we're at with distribution. Like, where are you guys? Where are we going to be able to see Hamlet in the Golden Vale yet, or do we know yet, or is that still kind of being worked out? I know there's some good opportunities before us, but talk to me a little bit about the distribution options, and then even if DIY is an option, and just kind of the whole conversation, and then how about mobilizing people? Where can we, as the audience, kind of get behind this and be a part of it?
Absolutely, yeah. Much of, especially in the early days of everything that I knew about distribution, I learned from you.
Nice.
And, in having conversations with you, and you have this great video where you kind of break down what mainstream distribution looks like. And so it's, as I always do, I did a lot of reading, I did a lot of studying, and kind of learned what the options are for the different groups. I think where we are right now is that we're applying to film festivals, and we're looking to add star power to our movie through what a traditionally successful festival run would be. Because we don't have any like name actors in the sense that you would normally hear about in Hollywood, and we don't have a topic that is quote unquote hot right now. And so the thing that could
a
really
bunch of no names doing Shakespeare.
Yeah,
who's not gonna love it.
Yeah, but it's and so what we do have is this this art that we believe in, and so if the festival circuit responds to that, then we could have a successful festival run, and that's going to be a calling card for a distribution conversation. I think that ultimately what we want to do is start with kind of a limited theatrical release, both domestic in a limited way, but in kind of big cities, New York, LA, that kind of thing, and really hoping that international is going to open some opportunities, because I really think that there are some international markets that would like this kind of thing, and the people that we've talked to have suggested as much. And then that could be a contract with someone that picks us up at a festival, but it could be DIY, and I'm totally into that. The idea of just like hitting up Angelica and being like, hey, I've got this movie. It did like this at this film festival. Yep. We'll put this up. We'll settle tickets. We'll split it and have that conversation. I'm totally comfortable having the conversation now, and I look forward to that if that happens. And after that, I think it's VOD. Yep. Or VOD or the other side of that, which would be Netflix, Hulu, Amazon, and kind of trying to get those deals together and figuring out how that works.
Yeah, the hope is for a festival run that engages really well with the VR experience and the feature happening together, and that they get behind the multifaceted experience of this story that has been so thoroughly a part of it from the inception of it. And then people just get really excited about it, and then maybe we sell it to somebody.
Yeah, I think that's right on. No, I think that's right on,
what
Taylor.
You hope for, right?
Yeah. No, that is the what I love about the idea, and when Katie reached out, it's the concept, right? That wins the day. She was able to briefly explain it to me. I immediately caught it. I caught the vision, and then was like, wait a minute, there's a VR element to it. And they actually went to Ireland and was in a castle for 11. All these like check marks, if you will, gets to a point where a viewer says, I want to see that. And see, that's that as a filmmaker, that's where we want to be. As a storyteller, you want to be where someone is leaning forward in their chair with anticipation of like, okay, I want to see how they pulled it off. I'm going to see what they're talking about. And again, when I got to see some of the footage, I was like, then I was leaning back in my chair like, they got something here. This is nice. It's looking good. It's hitting all the points for me, and so I'm really hopeful for this. So take me down then, Yuri. Where can people find you guys? Where can we get behind you and kind of like watch this and cheer you on as we all do as fellow filmmakers?
Absolutely, yeah. Well, the best place to check it out is our website, www.hameltinthegoldenvale.com. And you can, if you're the kind of person that wants to get updates on email, that would be a great place to look. Another place to kind of see the future of our innovations as such, because Hamelt in the Golden Vale has its life, but also us as a theater company, we're the theater company called Roll the Bones. So that would be www.rollthebonestheater.com.
And theater is spelled British.
R-E, Britishly. And so those are the kind of the two places to kind of see on updates on kind of what's going on. And I think another really good place to go would be our Instagram.
Okay.
Which is Hamlet in the Golden Vale, one word. And our Instagram is going to have lots of kind of short kind of quippy, like we got into this festival or we got this kind of distribution or here's a photo from where we're at. And so those would be the two places that I would really recommend following us on.
If you head to the website, hamletinthegoldenvale.com, and Vale is V-A-L-E, as in valley, then that'll have all the information. And you can kind of navigate the rest of there.
Well, I love it, guys. I'm rooting for you guys. I love that you guys are fellow film troopers. You have that just entrepreneurial spirit. You just saw the idea, you went out and did it. I'm proud of you just for going out there and doing it, you know. So super excited to be able to see the finished product. And yeah, I'll be watching. I'm already following you guys on Instagram. I'm on your email list, and so
amazing.
I'm a fan, and I'll make sure that I help get the word out and get people mobilized, because that's what we need, right? We need to back each other's stuff and then mobilize the
100%.
fan base. The power is in the unity of all of us. You
Yeah.
know? All right, guys. Well, thanks so much for your time. You guys have a great night. If there's something else that I can do, please do let me know. Otherwise, we will see you guys online, and we'll keep an eye out at our festival. So, because it will be coming to a festival near you, fingers crossed. So let's get out there and support Hamlet in the Golden Vale. Thanks, guys.
Ron, thanks
Absolutely.
for everything. It's
Thank
been a
you so
blast.
much for having us. Yeah.
Film Trooper, empowering filmmaking entrepreneurs.